One of the things that I've said quite frequently over the last couple of years was one of the reasons why we haven't really seen the big housing market crashes because jobs have been strong. Over the last 30 to 45 days, I'm starting to see a lot of layoff anxiety where the buyers are like, I don't know whether I'm going to get let go. Do they have reason to be concerned?
Would I be worried if I was a job seeker? Yes, I would, because you don't know what's coming. When you look at some of the stuff that I have, it really can worry you. All my models, all my projection and prediction models all point to Q3, Q4 this year.
There's going to be a lot of people out of work.
Yes. You can look at it all converging, and we're in for a little bit of a disaster, and nobody seems to realize that, or they just have their head in the sand. But it is a reality. People are not ready for this. And for everybody that thinks it's not going to affect them, it is so going to affect them.
Amanda Goodall, the job chick. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Todd. Thanks so much for having me on the show today.
I can't wait for our discussion. I want to learn all about you, but we're going to talk about what you do and the current state of the job market because, as you know, I'm a real estate broker. And I think that one of the things that I've said quite frequently over the last couple of years was one of the reasons why we haven't really seen the big housing market crashes because jobs have been strong. Now, of course, I'm not talking about how we were lied to about the overstated numbers and how we found out almost 1 million jobs were overstated last year. But I do want to dive into the real data, the real facts, and get that from you. But I think, would you agree with me that the housing market is the only thing that's propping it up right now is that we have seen such a decent jobs market so far up until now?
I would say you are correct in that. It is wild to kind of look at what's going on from the consumer point with what I do, and then also with jobs and careers, and just looking at what's going on with the housing. And, I hear different things from people like yourself and any of the other housing experts. And I'm just like, I don't know how this is working right now. How much longer is it going to be working? And that, I think, is one of the concerns that I guess we'll dive into today.
Yeah. Let's start by kind of giving us your background. How did you coin the name job chick?
For years I worked on copywriting, and I was a copywriting marketer. And I kind of fell into it. A lot of the people that I wrote for were like, hey, I'm looking for a job. And, and I started kind of going into that. So I actually just created the job chick, and that was like 20 years ago now, back when marketing was different and you could kind of build out that personality, and it was new. Branding was kind of a new concept, especially like personal branding for business. So a lot of people just kind of got it. I've had pink hair for over 20 years. I stand out. I'm not your typical career person, right? So I've just kind of fell into that, and I have been really, really lucky just with what I've been able to do. I have worked with tens of thousands of, career goers, mostly management directors, C-suite levels across the board over the years. And I've been lucky enough to be a mentor and advisor to businesses, just being able to see a little bit of everything that goes on. And, so as the job chick, yes, I used to do resumes and work on career paths for executives, or get onto boards, things like that. But I've really realized over the past probably about 10 years, the need for people to understand what's going on in the workforce. It's not just the numbers we see in headlines, and that everybody's used to that. It's all about the workforce intelligence. What is actually going on? What is going on with their HR teams, their legal teams, their C-suite teams? Where do you fit in as an employee, and what are the best companies you need to go for? So now, with everything that I do as the job chick and my new company, Edge Pulse, I work with investors, companies, HR, to just go, here, these are the signals. This is what's coming up in the next couple quarters, which is also, it kind of makes me go, okay, this is what's happening in a couple quarters. This is what's happening in the housing market as well. And, so I've built, like I said, I've built this really broad career and I love it. I'm currently an advisor, have been since 2019 to a company in credit. So I see the consumer side and what they're attempting to buy and housing, cars, things like that. So, I see the whole thing that's happening with student loans, credit scores, and everybody that's just like, yeah, I want to buy a house next month. And I'm like, okay. So, between that and jobs, it's been a wild ride and I love it. And, I would not change it for the world. So it's not exactly a career that you choose at, 17, 18 years old and just go, oh, this is what I want to do when I grow up, but I let it just ebb and flow and it's been great.
Well, that's awesome. Well, let's talk about jobs. So I'm seeing, I would say over the last probably 30 to 45 days, I'm starting to see a lot of layoff anxiety where the buyers are like, I don't know whether my job's going to be there. I don't know whether I'm going to get let go. I'm working hybrid or remote. They're talking about having people come back into the office. I can't do that now. I've had a baby. I've moved. The job anxiety or job layoff anxiety, is it real? Are you seeing it? And do they have reason to be concerned? I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. I just wanted to take a brief moment and let you know that this podcast is brought to you by SachsRealty.com. Here at Sachs Realty, we're committed to bringing you the best real estate education and helping buyers and sellers achieve their real estate goals. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so now. And don't forget, we're on every major social media platform, so you can follow us there as well. Now back to the show.
I don't sugarcoat anything. I'm just that person. A lot of it's self-imposed. Would I be worried if I was a job seeker? Yes, I would, because you don't know what's coming, and companies are getting very clever in disguising what layoffs are. From restructuring to, oh, we're going to have a nimble headcount. Okay, that means layoffs are coming. So you kind of have to read between the lines from a jobs point of view, from an anxiety point of view. Especially, going to become a buyer for a house. Yeah, everybody knows that we need to have 12 plus months in the bank, right? And I think that's even more important these days with everything because the job search is taking so long. Companies are kind of drawing the line in what's going on, but I'm not seeing job seekers go, okay, I'll play this game. They're not really thinking outside that box to go, if you just play the game, you're going to do well. So, like I said, that anxiety is a very self-imposed because they're just not thinking corporate. And unfortunately, we have to do that these days. Back when the great financial crisis happened, there was a very different sentiment among job seekers. They were like, no, I'm holding out. I'm going to hold out until I get the right pay or the right management and, role. And today it's just like, no, I'm not going into the office. I'm like, well, you could get a job. Things are harder now than they were back then. So being able to decide when you get a job really comes down to the candidate. It really, really does. And I know that sounds harsh to say, but the way you go about the job search and how you do it and how you put yourself forward, you can alleviate a lot of anxiety.
Now that's on the job search or seekers, but what about the ones that have a job and they're seeing where I know you're saying headlines, but we are seeing some pretty big layoffs coming down.
Yeah, there's a lot of layoffs. There's a lot of jobs. It is hard out there. Don't get me wrong. But everybody needs to think about it. And the headlines are very skewed, depending on what media publication you're reading. So you have to look at it from all of those angles. But there are a lot of jobs available. It is scary. It is going to take a long time if you are not doing it correctly. And I think that's my message to everyone. You've got to think about what is actually going on at the companies you are applying for. And, that is something nobody really looks at. They're just hitting easy apply and going, why am I not hearing back? And that's where we are with that.
Hmm. I think about jobs that are available. I know in Maryland, Wes Moore, our governor, just had some kind of post out there that said that they're going to, I think the number was 4,000 McDonald's jobs. We're going to hit the market or whatever. They were expecting this job increase at McDonald's. But I mean, you're not buying a house on working at McDonald's. I don't think. I mean, it wake me up if I'm wrong, but what do you tell people as far as price expectations? Do you see where these employers, as you're working with these C-suite executives, are you seeing where they're looking at ways of paying employees less money and getting things done without the need? I mean, labor's it's a big number on a financial statement. I mean, if you're looking at, a hard cost with everything else that they're paying for, what are you hearing? I mean, are you seeing where people are like, we're looking at the job and the housing market, and we're seeing where in a lot of markets, home prices have nearly doubled in 5 years. Salaries haven't doubled in 5 years. So where's the disconnect, and what are your thoughts about that?
With companies, things are changing. I mean, we know as job seekers, consumers, everything's changing. We've got AI, and from the beginning, it's been, oh, AI is not taking your job, and so some of these layoffs we are seeing, it is because companies are evolving, and AI is changing jobs. There are a lot that are disappearing. Things are changing, and job seekers need to be aware. But as far as what companies are doing, what a lot of people are still thinking of, because generally what the average time at a job is what, 3.8 years, I think, is the current number, which is really a short amount of time overall. Years ago that would have been called a job hopper, right? But everybody is still back in that 2021, 2022 mind frame where companies were just like, we'll pay you to work, because nobody wanted to. Everybody had all the checks just coming in. They could work from home. It was just whatever. So everybody got paid more. Salaries were higher. And this is, C-suites down. And now we don't have that 30 to 40% bump, which is huge for a lot of sectors. I would say anything over like the 150, 180, that bump in pay is not there anymore. And I have personally seen people turn down jobs that are north of 1 million because it's not the right fit. And that includes bonuses and stocks and all that kind of stuff. It's not just a straight hard salary, but
They're turning down jobs $1 million a year or more.
yeah, yeah. I actually spoke to somebody yesterday. They're happy where they
They're
are.
smoking what? What are they smoking? I mean,
Right? I know. And, I'm actually good friends with a really top executive recruiter in the casino and gaming industry. And, he's saying the same thing. People are, he's finding them jobs. You're talking 400,000 plus jobs. And they're like, yeah, this isn't for me, or I don't want to relocate. And I'm just like, you know what the job market's like right now? Good luck, because you're going to be out of a job for 6, 9, 12 plus months, because these are very niche roles. So I don't know. It's a weird reality that I don't think a lot of people are realizing right now. Anything under sub 150, 100, it's a different realm. I'm not as familiar with it, just with what I do now. But, you've got to be smart enough to take whatever jobs are out there, no matter what is going on. And I was just interviewed about side hustles and what's happening with that. And that is a very big reality, which also skews the numbers. If people are making money from whatever job that they're doing, then they're not unemployed, right? So when you see these like, oh, it's 4.2%, U3 unemployment, it's actually worse than that, because not everybody has that quality full-time job. And, but overall job seekers, I don't know, there's some kind of reality mix that is not going on with them right now. Just to say, no, I want $180,000 and I want to work from home. Those jobs are changing, and companies are realizing, hey, we can automate this stuff. So, we will see more layoffs, but there still will be jobs that people have to be smart enough to go, where do I fit in? Where does my skill set lie? And where do I need to move? And it might not even be within the same industry that you have been working in. And yeah, that's that's a hard reality to figure out, especially when you're doing it by yourself and just reading the headlines online.
Well, you've been at it for a while, so long enough to know that 20 years ago, a lot of companies were, because of healthcare costs, were finding ways to not have employees or shrink their employee count. And a lot of them were looking to not hire older people, but younger people, because younger people were cheaper on healthcare than older people were, because it's all based on your average age of your policy or what have you when you're offering healthcare. What is it now? So when is it just and just so everybody for context, so what Amanda, what you're referring to was in the COVID boom, the pandemic boom, was people were incentivized to not work. They were making more money on unemployment with their state and federal subsidy for whatever it was, 6 weeks or whatever, however long the federal government kicked in, whatever, $600-700 a week on top of the state, right? So it was like, wow, you're paying these folks more money than I'm able to pay them as an employer, and we can't get them to work. And what that sort of set them up for was the failure of, hey, I can make, you're not paying me enough. The government will pay me more than you will. You're obviously underpaying me, right? Which is one mindset. The other thing was, as a result of that, was people were being bonused to stay because they were being recruited away. So there were bonuses for them to stay and there were bonuses for them to leave. So companies were like, hey, we need you. We'll recruit you. We'll give you a sign-on bonus of however much money. And that made it the job market demand, where people were saying it didn't really keep up with inflation, that really injected a lot of unsustainable thinking, right, into the marketplace. Do you agree with me so far on what I'm saying? Okay. So now that the wake up is here and people are like, I want this amount of money, or I need to make this much to go to work here or do this, or I'm not coming back to work, is going to be faced with a new reality of, maybe if we start to see this downturn finally happen and a recession, there's going to be a lot of people out of work.
Yes.
Or
100%.
not being able to find a job.
Yeah, 100%. You know, running my different models and projections, just looking at what's coming in Q3, Q4, that's a concern to me. It hits a lot of industries. There's a few that are gonna survive a little bit better, but when you're looking at long-term unemployment continually increasing right now, I think it's at, gosh, I can't even remember the percentage right now, but it has been fully increasing. And midterm employment, anything after that 15, 20 weeks, you're starting to increase, and you're adding more people to it. The job search is taking a very long time now. And again, that's due to so many different things. That just not understanding the companies, the way recruitment works. So get me started on the recruiting and HR side of things and how that is just a complete disaster. But for whatever reason it is, long-term unemployment is going to keep rolling, and we are going to reach that pinnacle. I know people are like wanting to call it a Great Depression or a recession, and I'm not an economist. I don't know what we're going to call it, and it probably will just be in hindsight, but you can look at it all converging, and you know, like I said, you know, seeing what I see going on in housing, what's going on with the consumer side, the student loans, the credit, and jobs. We're in for a little bit of a disaster, and nobody seems to realize that, or they just have their head in the sand. And I'm not really sure which, and it's probably a bit of both. But either way, we do have issues afoot on so many angles.
So working with these companies, Amanda, and I completely agree with what you're saying, working with these companies and advising them, what are we seeing? So like I had said before, we were watching the rise of healthcare. Then all of a sudden the shift was, you know what, we don't want And I know it. I know people that were affected. My mom was affected by it. We don't want to hire older people. We only want to hire younger people. What will be the next wave? What will these businesses be looking at? And I guess what are they saying now? Like, what are they looking at? Are they saying we need to hire more independent contractors so that we don't have these expensive costs on the payroll? So where the side hustles will become important? Are they saying that we want only tech savvy individuals? What are they looking for? And what are they looking to cut as far as employees? What would that employee demographic look like?
Yeah, companies are madly focused on skills right now. Just a lot of tech skills, especially as we're moving forward and they're figuring out how to upskill their current workers and reskill all the new people coming in. With that said, what are they trying to cut? Mid-management. Mid-management's done. I mean, a lot of the layoffs we have seen are some level of mid-management. It's paperwork upon paperwork and I hear it all the time. People are like, no, we have a really important job. I'm like, well, when you look at it all, there's a lot of things that can be changed. Companies are getting smart to automation. It's not that they weren't before, but there's a lot of programs out there. There's a lot of SaaS products that really make a difference on how companies can manage what used to be needed as a human to be able to do. And that doesn't exist anymore. So mid-management will be going out. A lot of the areas of, some HR, ironically, some legal is starting to disappear a little bit. Any of that admin side of things. And then you have companies like Klarna who stopped hiring altogether. They figured out a whole automation process to replace 800 people. And they're starting to realize, oh, well, we kind of automated customer service, but we realized, oh, people actually like talking to humans. So they're hiring some people to replace that. So every company and every industry is going to have to figure this out. And we have a long time period. We are only at the beginning of what companies are focusing on, trying to figure out, seeing if it works. Is it going to work what they're doing? Time will tell over this. So people have to be very, very flexible. And, the big focus when I'm talking to companies is they're like, well, what's happening? What's going to happen? Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball. I have some models I can run and we plan different things off of that. But overall, we have to not jump too hard too fast. And, the big worry that I have with a lot of companies and just watching them just run around, they are in this headspin about skills. So if that is going to be their very important point at this moment, what job seekers, consumers need to know is you need to be ready to do whatever. So learn that tech, learn the AI, be comfortable with it because everything is changing towards tech-based roles. Yes, there will still be I have to be speaking to a human and you still have to do that, but the tech behind it is still going to be there. So learn and be ready to adapt with all of that because that is what companies are going to need at the end of the day, no matter how they decide to stack up their employment levels. Tech is there and tech is here to stay and AI is here to stay and we can run with it. It's easy. It's easy to do. You just got to jump into it.
I was interviewing an AI creator, programmer at one of our trade shows, and he said that pretty soon the first love of any young person will be their AI assistant or something to that effect because of the machine learning. You talk about talking to a human. I have spoken to some AI programs where they were asking me questions and answering questions pretty well and they almost sounded like a human, to be honest with you. I mean, I couldn't believe it with some of the capabilities that these machines have now. I want to ask you, I was at a commercial real estate conference called the Internet of Things with BOMA, Building Owners and Managers Association down in Nashville, Tennessee. I want to say the year was 2017, it may have been 2018. But what they were talking about at this conference, and we've seen in commercial real estate where people think that this office reduction was a result of COVID, but it wasn't. It was actually happening way before COVID, where people were thinking about remote employees, shrinking down everybody. Think about it, the way offices were set up. When we go in and we ask somebody what their office requirements were, we wanted to know how many employees they had, because most people had their own actual office. They weren't cubicles. They were, especially the executives. Now the executives are sitting out in open workspaces, but um, you had conference rooms and waiting rooms and reception areas, and you wanted to know how much they were planning on growing with employee growth, really, because that would determine how much office space they would need. Well, at this conference, this Internet of Things conference they were talking about, that's all changing. They were designing buildings with rooftop lobbies so that drone deliveries could happen. They were planning bigger drop-off areas in the newer buildings, especially in the newer cities, because of autonomous cars, us being shuttled to work, the ones that did come in. And they were squashing down the actual size of the office space per employee. It wasn't like it used to be like 100 square foot or 110 square foot per employee, up to 150 square foot per employee. And you saw that shrinking down to 70, 80 square feet per employee. I think that COVID slowed that progress down a bit because they weren't ready to go into such a remote work environment. But what I truly believe, as the cost of these major corporations, after all of these consolidations, the Walmart effects, where you only have a couple really large companies and they make it really super easy for us to conduct business. Some may be frustrated about it, but we're starting, look, if we can't get it the same day, something's wrong, right? I mean, we can order something from Walmart and have it delivered by drone the same day. So imagine if now you have to get in your car and drive to a store and not see it on the shelf and be frustrated or whatever. But my point is that we were seeing this consolidation in corporate America, and a lot of it was because of cost related, decision making. How do we get the cost down? How do we compete in the environment? How do we use less people to get something done? I'm not saying it's right, but it's the way that these corporations think. And one of the things that they were saying was that in 5 years, 50% on an estimated basis back then, 2017, 2018, that in 5 years from that point, 50% or more of our workforce would be independent contractors. That way they could spend their money just on what it is that they need that specialty work performed, and that they can put it out to compete instead of having Joe or John or Mary or whatever that you're paying all this money, all these healthcare costs, all the building, the electricity needs, all that stuff, and getting mediocre service sometimes when they could hire an independent contractor to do it and only pay for that specific work. Do you think that that is something that we'll see happen moving forward? Do you think that businesses are going to be looking for independent contractors versus employees?
From what I'm hearing, yes. And it's gonna be a slow adoption. I think the 5 years might have been very early thinking, but there are a lot of companies thinking about that. And like you mentioned, this isn't new. Companies have figured this out. When they announced they're moving offices or something or downgrading, it wasn't a decision made yesterday. This is years in planning. And, they know what their company's gonna do years ahead of time. And, so like Goldman Sachs, I mean, they're shutting down their London and a New York office, and they're moving to Dallas and Salt Lake. And, they told their employees, you can have the job, you just got to move to one of those places. So what that looks like for them overall on a relocation package and stuff like that, you have to consider very different lifestyle from London and New York to Salt Lake City. Beautiful area, but it is a very different life, So companies do make those decisions. With regards to the contractor versus employee, I do believe we're going to see that. It's funny because there's been a lot of people that have kind of jumped into the fractional roles, which honestly I just call them glorified freelancers. You can call it freelance, you can call it fractional. It's kind of the same thing. But, some kind of a hybrid concept of what you can offer as an employee, your skill set, your job mindset, companies will start to look at people as contractors because like you said, you're not going to have the healthcare packages, you're not going to have the benefits, you're not going to have to pay them as much, you're not going to have to worry about HR having to manage employees so much. It's going to be a very big cost savings. And, we do see that from the downsizing from the buildings that we are having. The relocations companies are doing with their people going to cheaper towns. And yeah, contracting, yeah, I do believe that is going to be something. We'll probably start seeing that in the next 5 years, thinking, 2030, that will be more normal for a lot of them. And, I would say manufacturing is probably going to be anything manufacturing, warehousing will probably be one of the first ones to do that. You look at all the union stuff going on, that's pricey, right? But if you can do it as a contractor, it's a very, very different concept for companies. And companies, they've always been about cost savings, always. How do we reduce this? How do we build this and, sell it for more and make it for cheaper? That has always been the mindset. And that's what corporate America is. And now they're thinking about it with people and talent and, going to the different HR conferences I do, I do see them trying to figure that out, even to the point where they're like, well, how much is this skill worth? And so they have this whole database of skills that they're trying to price. So they're like, if I need this person, then we go, okay, these are the skills you have. Okay, now you're worth the salary. So they're just working through that out, working all of that out. And I think the contractor role is going to change that. You just go, yes, I have these. And they go, okay, well, the job is this. Plain and simple. This is what it is. So yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. Well, you say that 5 years was probably a little ambitious, and I don't disagree with that. But like I said, I mean, if it, let's just say, if my memory serves me correct, I think it was 2018. It was only 2 years into that when we saw the nation shut down, and it forced everybody to buy their staff laptop computers with computer cameras and microphones and try and adapt to how does this work. And it was like, well, wait a minute, we were thinking about not having this many employees, but we weren't prepared on doing it at a halt. So I think that now as they're trying to get people back to work and they're realizing that, you know what, we may need to just get rid of people and rehire. That may be the consideration. Let's talk about student debt. You mentioned it a couple times. What are you seeing with student debt now that this is, I mean, they forgot about it for 4 years, right?
Yeah, that is the excuse I hear a lot. Oh, I forgot that I had that. I don't know how you forget that. A student debt is not a small chunk of change, right? But it's real. It's hitting. Credit reports. We saw people that dropped 180 points. The higher your score, typically showed you were better with credit, so it hit you harder. The lower the scores you had, you probably only lost 50, 75, which is still a big hit. I don't care what your score is. 50 points is still massive. We saw a lot of people that they're now priced out of buying a house, a car, getting or keeping or even their credit cards at the limits that they had, just because this is a very real thing now. So, overall, something that I really try to talk about on X and everything is that what people don't realize is that your credit score will also affect your job. We know that it's checked for buying any big purchases, of course. And insurance checks it, because if your credit score is not great, are you stressed? What's the problem? Are you more likely to cause an auto accident? Oh, we're gonna kick up that premium. That already happens. And employers do look, and what used to be just the financial sectors, very high ups, professional services, those are the ones that used to have that credit check before. It's now becoming a more commonplace thing. It's about 10%, a little over, of companies that do look at credit. And, so it's when you sign and you check off the, oh yeah, do my credit check because I was just offered the job. You're not thinking about that. But they do look at that from an overall standpoint to go, is this person stressed? Is there productivity issues? Because stress leads to problems, right? And, it's not to say that it's gonna hit everybody, but it is a risk factor that companies are starting to go, "Wait a minute, we need to look at this." And, the student loan thing, I think, is just a massive wake-up call to go, "Yeah, we have a consumer debt problem in America, and, how is that going to start affecting us from a career standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint on what we can afford?" Housing, cars, everything, and it's to watch the student loan thing happen in real time, seeing the messages, come through. I have my team at the company I advise go, "Here's what's happening. How do we deal with this?" It's it just blows your mind because 'cause they're just like, "Well, I have to buy a car next week. So how do I deal with this?" I just, and they dropped 120 points, and I'm like, It's not happening." Um, it's a hard reality for many, and then you have everything that's going on with the wage garnishment, which should be starting this summer. Well, for everybody that hasn't been paying, that maybe they saved, maybe they didn't, I don't know everybody's situation, but what if they bought a house in the past 4 years? Are they gonna be able to afford their mortgage and the automatic wage garnishment of several $100s coming out? I don't know. We're already seeing foreclosures increase. There's a lot of problems at stake, and I know people are just like, "Oh, good, they shouldn't, have a home, or they shouldn't be able to buy." And it's a weird sentiment, just to watch. It's online. What are you gonna do, right? But in reality, this does affect not just those that are wanting to buy a home or wanting to rent a house or get an apartment. It is affecting those that have bought it over the past several years. And maybe they bought it pre the pandemic, even. But now that this is hitting, this is a major blow. There's a lot of people that have $300, $400, $500 payments that should be made to their student loans. Well, that's not going to be garnished. There's no court order needed. It's a problem.
I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking what keeps popping into my head is that more and more you're going to have a social score, almost like China, right? I mean, what you're saying, and it's interesting because I had someone, a friend of mine's son, that had said to me, they were getting into the heating and air business and had worked for my friend, his business, and he decided he didn't want to do that anymore, wanted to go, which was in contracting, and he really wanted to go into heating and air. And so he called me and he was asking me some pointers on, I had a friend of mine that runs a big region for a heating and air manufacturer. So I connected him with him, and it worked out that he ended up getting a job with somebody, and they wanted to pull his credit. In fact, they did. And he was asking me, he's like, is it normal? They want my social security number before they hire me because they said they're going to do a credit check. And I'm thinking, a heating and air contractor is going to do a credit check on you for a laborer? Okay. For tech. But what you're saying is 100% true. They are doing that because I guess people want to know, like, what kind of a person are you? Are you somebody that pays your bills? Are you someone that's going to, think about the impact of if you're an employee and somebody attaches a wage garnishment, that's a pain in the neck for the employer. They have to collect that, write another check. There's more accounting that's involved. They have to account by court order to pay that wage garnishment. Employers don't necessarily want to deal with that. But what I'm thinking, and here, as you're saying this, is I'm thinking that, man, we are really getting ourselves, look, all the short-term rental sites, Airbnb, you have a social score there, right? You use Uber, you have a social score there. They may not take your ride if you have a 2-star profile or whatever. Everything is kind of coming together and tying together. Now, the question that I have, and believe me, you probably haven't listened to all of my videos to where I've talked about this, but I have a question for you. Should their student debt be forgiven, like the Biden administration was alluding to and promising them forever? Well, why do I want to pay off my student loan if it's going to get wiped out, which is a valid question. Hell, I don't know whether I would pay mine off if they're going to wipe out $50,000 in student debt. Should we be bailing these kids out, or should we say, you know what, you signed a contract, you owe the money?
I I'm in the camp of you signed a contract, you owe the money. Yes, it was great for anybody that got even a little bit of relief from the last administration. With what happened, good or bad, it is what it is now. I think Linda McMahon, who heads up the DOE now, she was very clear that we're not bailing you out. We are not doing this, and also the money's owed. So and I think the current default, if I'm correct, I believe it is 25% of the student loan federal portfolio, which is massive. 25. That is, they want their money, and so far they've already collected about 100 million, but the debt's massive. There's so much more to be collected, and that's why this wage garnishment is starting. They weren't messing around. It's tough. It's tough. It's tough time-wise. If this happened a few years ago, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad, but I think just where everything is starting to converge, between housing and inflation and expenses and just life and how much everything is and where consumer debt sits, whether, it's self-imposed consumer debt or not, just, what happenstance. We are at a very tough time for this to be a reality, but it is a reality. People are not ready for this. And for everybody that thinks it's not going to affect them, it is so going to affect them. Even if you don't have student debt, it is still going to affect you because you're still going to be part of that risk profile. You're that same age. You did have student loans. They're going to see that. Are they going to throw you into that same risk profile? It kind of looks like it. It's interesting you mentioned this, the whole social score. Fintechs have been playing around with that idea, and those that are kind of dealing with the credit side and companies like Chime, et cetera, they are playing with those ideas where they're like, well, we're not going to look at it from a credit. We want to track your spending habits. We want to know who you are. And, with these financial wellness programs starting to get rolled out more and more, we have companies that are offering like an employer wallet where your money goes into that and then you can spend from that. Well, they're just tracking your spending. So overall, from a credit standpoint, that social score concept is now, it's not necessarily credit anymore. It is that, you got 2 stars because you didn't spend all your money at Starbucks last week. There are those things. So how soon is that going to fully take hold is, I guess, the big question. And are employers going to look at that as that social score concept? Because like you said, it costs a lot. If they have to go deal with student loan wage garnishments, for instance, or any wage garnishments from any debt, that costs payroll a lot more. Do companies want to spend that? I don't know. So we have a lot of aspects all at play right now, which nothing is fully done. It's not finished. I think companies are starting to figure out what works, what doesn't. The different programs I see them build and start to, put in, they're looking and seeing where it saves them money. And a lot of these programs are free to employers, which a lot of people wouldn't have guessed either, which is just kind of wild, but they're doing it for the data and they do it because they make money on the transactions. So there's a lot of watching going on, so that social score is kind of a real thing. It's just not the same thing like China has or things like that, but
Yet.
And that is very much a reality.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the whole thing is scary. I mean, we talk about what we're seeing right now in absence of what I think the true AI capability will be. I mean, I think that everybody's looking at it just like what you're saying. With the social score, it gets to a point where there's just no turning back. And once you start adding on to these things, it takes a life of its own. And what you can't do is tell people not to consider it. So if the data is there and you're a decision maker where your decision is to either hire somebody or not hire somebody, or be friends with somebody, or to take this person as a client or not take this person as a client, and we start to take all of this, what seems to be for the good right now, and roll it forward however many years, maybe not even a decade, it becomes a very scary environment to live in. I believe it really is. Um, Staying on the student debt for a minute, I see. Well, I'll sort of preface it with this. So, what we're starting to see is just like what you're saying here, that now people that were qualified even 2 or 3 months ago to buy a house are no longer qualified to buy a house because their credit score dropped below the amount that where you could get a loan. And yeah, whether it's going to come even accelerate from wage garnishments, people that have purchased a home, I'd say since 2021, let's just call it 21, 22, 23, they're already getting hit with higher insurance costs where no one told them that their payment was going to go up. I get a lot of them that call me and they're like, Todd, my payment just went up $800 a month. I don't have it. What do I do? We're both working. Nobody's making more money. And, we didn't get that yearly bonus, or we didn't get that raise that because the employer said, you know what, we're not having the best year. So we're not giving those bonuses or wage increases. Now I have a payment that's up $800 a month. What do? We can't afford it, because no one told them your insurance is going to go up every year. We didn't know how much. Your property tax is going to go up every year. Now that student loan that wasn't even considered as a payment is now all of a sudden another $400 or $500 a month. And they're going, man, I don't have it. And now the air conditioning is breaking, or the roof needs to be replaced, or this is happening. So it really is. I don't think people understand the magnitude of what we're looking at with this consumer debt crisis. But what I've seen in the housing market is a lot of people are waking up. They're saying, you know what, my friends are in this position. I don't want to be in that position. I didn't buy a house 3 years ago, and I'm glad I didn't because, I can't afford it. But it doesn't take long for the amnesia to set in, to where they forget. And we see still a lot of mistakes that were made back in 2005, 2006 were made in 2021, 22, and 23. And everybody overspends. It's this consumer-ish, we're a society of consumers. That's all we do, spend money in America. What do you think is going to happen? Are the students now going to high school, the middle schoolers getting ready to go into high school, are they going to look at college debt the same way as their several generations ahead of them signed the documents, and now they're realizing that they didn't stay in college, or they didn't go down the career path, or they can't afford to make the college loan payment? They feel like college screwed them over by charging them a ridiculous amount of money. We're paying athletes a fortune to now play football at universities. Coaches are making $3 million, $4 million, $6 million a year at colleges and universities. But yet the government said, go ahead, sign the documents. We're going to guarantee you're not going to have to pay anything until you graduate. Will the younger generations have amnesia to what's going on right now? Or is this going to change the path going forward for them to spend $50,000, $60,000 a year to go to college?
I think the question is, are colleges still going to exist in the next, over the next decade? There's so many issues going on, and there's a lot of blame going, well, colleges are to blame for this because of just the crazy cost.
Make them pay the bailout.
Right. I see that a lot. And then you have what the administration is doing, just cutting funds. Colleges are going to suffer. What do I think high schoolers are going to have amnesia? Maybe. I'm not if you're going into medical school or becoming a lawyer, yes, please go to college, but I'm also not a big proponent of it. I have 9 kids, and they're all adults now except one left at home. And,
You said you have 9
I
kids?
do, yes. But
Wow.
some went to college and they're getting PhDs and things like that because they need it for what they're doing. If you're going into forensics or nuclear, you need that, But there's for a lot of people, it's not necessary. And what I th I believe my youngest daughter, the last one at home, she's 16, and, she's not interested in going to college, but, um, she she also realizes, and I think a lot of high school students, it's not necessarily that they're looking at the debt going, "Oh, I don't wanna have the debt." I don't think at that age you're that aware of how much it affects. Maybe some cases, but I don't believe it's kinda like I don't know, when I was 16, I wasn't paying attention to that. If that would've been the scenario now, it wouldn't have given me pause. Um, Maybe I'm just different. But, what people are thinking, what this younger generation, Alpha, Gen Zs especially, they are going, "I wanna work differently." And, good or bad, I have my opinions on the way they're approaching it. But, it will change, and because AI and companies and the restructuring is all changing as well, I'm wondering right now if colleges are gonna have to change. Is it gonna be more program-centric to build contractor mindsets maybe? To build this other mindset, not to go to college and do this four-year program, but not really the trade aspect either, but, more of that, let's give you the skills that these companies need. Because like I said, companies are so focused on skills right now. And, even to the point that there was a Gartner report, I believe, the other day, and they said about 45% of HR managers are realizing it, you having a degree doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do the job. So they are starting to realize that. Whereas it used to be like, oh, don't have the degree, you're kicked out. We're not even gonna talk to you. Now they realize people can just do it because everything's going based on skills, which is really great for that contractor aspect. If you're smart enough to go, I know this company or this industry needs this, I'm going to go make sure totally fall in line. You're going to have the roles. I hope, I hope that high schoolers see what's happening and are smarter. Honestly, I've seen different college fairs, and honestly, those are like the biggest levels of poison I've ever seen. It's marketing. They're businesses. At the end of the day, colleges are businesses, and I know nobody likes my opinion on this, but it's true. They're a business. Watching them in all these lines. I went to this one in DC several years back. I think it was in 2019 actually. And, it was wild to watch. And I don't deal with, I don't deal with it from a career standpoint. I don't deal with that, but I got invited to it by somebody that was one of the people running it. So I went there to go see it, and I'm just walking down these aisles, and I'm just hearing them talk to these kids, and they're selling them the idea of what they can have come to this college, even though tuition's worse because it's out of state. But here's some cool socks. here's a pen with our logo on it, and I know everybody loves swag, but, it's a weird thing to think that colleges were told, right? We were told, you and I, we were told, "Go to college, it works. This is what you're supposed to do." That's what Gen Xers, millennials, whatever, I don't you name it, they were told, "Go to college. You're gonna have a job. You're gonna be set for life." Well, it doesn't work like that anymore, and to watch these college fairs still go on, they're run as a business. They are a business. And, they're not this magical place where you just, get your life set with a job. It's not how it works anymore. So I'm really hoping people change. I'm really hoping companies figure out the skill concept. Right now, they're just running around a little bit madhouse, but it can change and it can get better. Colleges, I think, are gonna start dying a little bit, and, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna smile when that happens.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that you said that you didn't think that they should just be let go of the debt. I mean, I think that we're teaching something very bad if we continue with these debt jubilees where people just can be forgiven or be wiped out. I would be completely fine if the universities paid them back. If we could say that the universities in some way have failed students over the decades. But then again, it's kind of like one of those things where if you want to blame if you want to blame your parents, you'd have to blame their parents, and if you want to blame their parents, you'd have to blame their parents, because we really become, at some point you have to say, you know what, I'm not going to blame people anymore. I'm just going to take responsibility as an adult, and I'm just going to make a change moving forward. I'm not going to play the blame game. However, when I say that, the universities were really excited when the government said that they would step in and cover all of these, student loans and allow these kids to go to college. Well, guess what? Instead of giving them scholarships or financing the tuitions, the colleges financing the tuitions, it's great. We don't have to mess with any of that. The government's going to step in. Let's just raise our costs so that we can, have it all, it got out of hand. I want to just go over a couple things with you before we let you go. And by the way, this is great. I love having you on the show. I'm so glad that I found you. All of Amanda's information and links are in the show notes. Follow her on X, and she's very active on LinkedIn. By the way, I know you get a lot of, I just want to say, accept my LinkedIn invite so I can tag you on and send people your way when this video drops. But I know you probably get a ton of requests like I do as well. But all your information is below. But one of the things that I found in one of your posts, you said this is insane. 2.3 million borrowers just dropped into subprime credit scores. Less than 600. 2.2 million lost 100 points in 3 months. 1 million plus lost 150 points. Some got hit for missing just $440 that they didn't know was due. 2.4 million would have qualified for cars, mortgages, credit cards before the hit. 63 billion in consumer spending could vanish from the economy. The student debt time BMB is bomb is what you were saying, has gone off. I guess, do you think that what we watched happen as a result of people giving up on buying homes? A lot of people gave up on buying homes and they just said, you know what? I'm just going to spend my money. I'm just going to go out to the bars. I'm going to go to the restaurants. I'm going to take those vacations. Screw it. I'm not worried about saving money. I'm never going to buy a house. We heard this over and over. I have over and over again from our audience, from our callers, from our sending emails. Now that this is hitting them in a different way, where it is going to add up and maybe keep them from getting a job, and they're going to have to buckle down and pay these back debts that they didn't think they were going to have to pay. How is that going to trickle down into consumer spending? And I know you don't like to predict, but what are your thoughts as far as how that will affect that consumer, that whole cohort of spenders yanking it out of the marketplace? It's a lot of people, a lot of money. Is that going to push us into the recession that we've been waiting for?
Quite possibly. I love predicting. Most people don't like to hear me. But, my whole business is speculative and projections. But, with regards to the recession, again, I don't know whether it's going to be a recession or a depression or whatever, and I can see arguments on both. We know the job market's not great. We know housing's not fantastic right now. And we know what's going on with the consumer debt. And, I think in that piece I wrote, it was saying, I think it was a Bloomberg economy piece that did the 63 billion might be taken out of the economy from consumer spending because of this. And, when you look back at it, I really believe that, because of what happened during the pandemic and we all were stuck at home, when we could take our masks off and go out, we just spent. And we spent the money we didn't have or that we saved because everybody got the paychecks during that time. And we just went wild. And that's where we are today. And I still don't believe it's a lesson learned. Do I think that if I had to call it, are we going to go into a recession? I think we've been in one for a while. To be completely honest, and again, I'm not an economist. I couldn't tell you all of that. Looking at it from the job standpoint, looking at it from a consumer standpoint, the job market really, really took a hit June 2024. And everything changed and everything started snarling up. And that's when we started seeing, it wasn't necessarily that, unemployment was up or down. Again, I don't look at the BLS numbers. Yes, I look at them. I don't really take them into consideration, just like I don't take sentiment into consideration. I go, what are we feeling? What's actually going on? And that's why I think workforce intelligence is so important, because it tells you what's really happening industry-wide, company-wide, how secure are we? And when you look at some of the stuff that I have, it really can worry you. It's not that I don't sleep at night but, do I think there's going to be a converging of everything? Yes, and everything, all my models, all my projection and prediction models all point to Q3, Q4 this year. So I do believe there'll be a lot more layoffs structured as whatever phrase the CEO or the board wants to call it, because that's where we are at the end of the day. Will that affect consumer spending? Heck yeah, it's going to. And it's going to affect everything that we purchase, whether we want a home, whether we want an apartment or rent a house. It's going to affect everything. The car market. It's that's not really something I really, really look at much, but look at the prices of cars. They're so, I think the average is like $650 for a payment on a car. What? Like, what world? But I see them all the way up to like 1,000, 1,200 as well, and they're like 30, 60 days late, just constant. Well, all you have to do is get one layoff. Done. Right? And that's the same with housing and with all the stuff that's going on with the FHA right now, with the government helping pay some of the stuff that I've seen. Again, I'm not my field, but what I've read, I'm just like, yeah, you tie all of that in. And the fact that we're not getting bailed out, no matter whether it's just because we're spendy over the last couple of years, or we have student loans, or whatever it happens to be, we are not getting bailed out. We have to take care of ourselves right now. It's not going to be good. I do have a silver lining. With that said, everything from the job market, late Q1 going into Q2 next year, I do see it's going to pick up. It's going to change. It's not going to be what we had before. It's not going to be like, oh, our unemployment just plummeted. It's not going to be that. But I do see, yes, tough times ahead. It does look a little bit better, barring, any massive more tariff wars or trade wars or whatever going on, or wars. I think, barring anything like that, and I constantly run my stress models on that just to kind of see where we're going, especially, industry by industry, because that's important. Because yes, you might have been in tech. Tech is changing a lot. Well, where can you take those skills? Where can you take, and depending on what industry you're at, you might have to change industries to survive. And so I try to look at it from a whole industry standpoint, but consumers have a tough time ahead, no matter what sector you're in. It's going to be a bit tough.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everything you're saying. And I do think that the silver lining is there, obviously, but it will be more for the people that at least take heed now and prepare and stop their reckless spending if they are, and maybe stick with the job that you have because it does pay the bills and it is a job, versus trying to jump ship somewhere right now in a time where, we could definitely see a lot of change. Well, Amanda Goodall, I thank you so much for your time, and you'll cruise on over to her links, check her out, follow her, subscribe to her, and we hope to get you back as this ever-changing economic environment unravel. So
thank you so much for having me on, Todd. This has been great. And yes, I'm happy to talk anytime.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for watching. If you like the video, you can let us know by smashing that thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please consider doing so now. Hit that alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content just like this. Keep those comments and questions coming. And one of the biggest compliments you can do for us all here at Sachs Realty is to share our channel and this video with your family and friends. This will help us to continue to build this amazing online community with viewers just like yourself. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.